The Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. Jesus went up the mountain and sat there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a large crowd coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over, so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who is come into the world." When Jesus realized that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near their boat, and they were terrified. But Jesus said to them, "It is I. Do not be afraid." Then they wanted to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the land toward which they were going. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated. I am sure some of you are familiar with the movie Forrest Gump. If you know the story, you will remember the part where Forrest begins running. As he runs and runs and runs, a crowd begins to follow him. And the people cannot seem to get enough of what they see as they watch him continue to run. Then, at one point, Forrest simply decides he is done running, and it is time to stop and go home. When that happens, one person in the perplexed crowd says and asks, "What will we do? What will we do?" That they can no longer watch Forrest Gump run. What will we do? This is the question we find in today's gospel reading. Today's gospel passage, the feeding of the 5,000, is the only miracle story that is found in all 4 of the gospels, and it is found in 2 of the gospels twice. So that means it is quite important as a story, and this question is significant. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, when faced with this perplexing problem of feeding so many people, the disciples are the ones to ask Jesus the question, what will we do? But as we read John's version of this story, we discover there is a major twist in the tale. In John's gospel, we hear Jesus asking Philip, what will we do? Jesus has been continually moving through Galilee doing the work of ministry, teaching, speaking words of hope, and healing people. The crowd begins to follow him around, and because of his miraculous healings, they continue to follow him around, and the crowd grows. And in today's story, 5,000 plus, and it is probably plus, people follow him up a mountain, wanting to see more of his astonishing healing power. Jesus surveys the crowd, and already knowing what he is going to do, he is the one who asks Philip this test question. Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat? They are hungry. So what are we going to do? Jesus is the one who asks the disciples, and by extension, asks the likes of each one of us, what are we going to do? How are we going to deal with this problem of hunger? Hunger is a universal experience. From the moment we enter this world, we are faced with hunger. Hunger is something we all know well and understand. We all feel it when our bellies are empty. We all know that incessant feeling, what it's like when hunger always returns and our bodies need some nourishment. Alexander Solzhenitsyn once said, "The belly is an ungrateful wretch. It never remembers past favors. It always wants more tomorrow." Hunger propels us to that which gives us life, that which we quite literally cannot live without. When Jesus asks Philip this question, Philip responds quite logically and rationally. He begins to calculate how much money they would need to buy supper for all 5,000 plus people. He replies, half a year's paychecks won't do the trick. Our budget just is not big enough. Our resources are just too few. However, Jesus knows that conventional, logical answers are not what is needed and called for in this situation. Then Andrew looks around and he does a practical survey of the situation to figure out what is available. He comes to Jesus saying, well, there's someone here, a kid, with 5 barley loaves and a couple fish. The very sensible Andrew tells Jesus that what is available is the lunch of a boy, someone who is not a power broker, someone who has no social rank or standing. We know this because barley flour is the flour that was used by the poor folks. They used it to make their loaves of bread. The rich did not use barley. In Andrew's words, we get the sense that real needs are not necessarily filled by the folks to whom we often look for help, those who have much. And as John continues to tell this story, it becomes very clear that Jesus himself is the only one who can end real hunger, hunger of every kind, not just the sort of hunger that makes for growling stomachs at lunchtime. John makes this very clear because in his telling of the story, this miracle takes place near the time of Passover, and Jesus himself becomes the host of the meal. Jesus is the one who distributes the food. In the other 3 Gospels, It is the disciples who take up the work of distributing the food. But in John, something else is going on. Jesus himself is the one who feeds the 5,000 plus people. And in John's telling of this story, after Jesus feeds the crowd, he tells his disciples, gather up the fragments so that nothing is lost. This is important. The Greek word used for lost really means perishing. Jesus' real purpose is to keep people from getting lost, from perishing, and to provide nourishment that lasts and keeps us truly alive. John's placement of this story near the time of Passover, where Jesus serves as host, is very intentional because it is Jesus himself who will become the real food. In fact, in just a few verses, the verses we will actually hear next week, Jesus says, I am the bread of life. Those who come to me will never hunger. Jesus is saying, I am the real food, the most important food. Don't spend your lives on food that spoils. Don't stock the shelves of your life with perishables. Put me there instead. Make me your staple, the food that is going to last. When you are hungry, reach first for me. I have absolutely no doubt that you will experience some form of hunger today. And I have no doubt that many of us have a gnawing hunger within that food alone will not fill. We try to fill that void by shopping and buying more stuff. We try to fill that void of hunger through travel. We try to fill that hunger by striving for success. We even try to fill that hunger by pushing our kids to achieve extreme success so that they can then push their kids to do the same thing. And the cycle spirals on and continues through generations. We try to fill the emptiness within through a whole variety of addictions, whether it be alcohol, drugs, video games, food, sex, gambling, or whatever. Even those who have more money than anyone else in the world and seem to have everything they could possibly need have this deep hunger. So they try to fill that hunger by doing absurd things like compete with the other richest people in the world to fly into space, all for their own personal pleasure. However, everything we human beings do in our attempts to fill the void within is always, always, always going to leave us empty and starving again. It really is all futile and will never fill the emptiness we feel. So I ask you, each of you, what are you really hungry for? How are you hungry? And how are you trying to fill the emptiness within? God really cares about your answers to these questions. God cares about your hunger, and God is calling you to Jesus' table of life, where you can feast on this bread called Jesus, a food that is very strange indeed. It is strange because we consume this Jesus food and take it into our very selves as ordinary bread. We digest this Jesus food and it becomes a part of us. But this bread, this life of Jesus, does something that ordinary bread does not do. You see, when we consume this Jesus food, Jesus begins to consume us. When we consume the bread at this table, the broken body of Jesus makes us a part of his very self. And when we consume this bread, we become food for a broken world. We become broken, living loaves of bread. People of God, Jesus, the one who became broken and went to the cross out of love for this world, stands before each one of us, and he is saying to each one of us, what are you going to do? Feed on me. Feed on my very life. I am the real food that matters. I am the one who will truly satisfy your hungry heart. I am more than enough, and there is abundance as I give you my life, my very life. Come and feast on my banquet of life. Amen.